My name is Julia, and at 28 years old, I managed to build what most people would call a pretty good life. After years of hard work, I landed a position at one of the most prestigious companies in the city. The salary was excellent, and one of my biggest dreams finally came true. I bought my own apartment. It wasn't anything extraordinary, but it was mine. I paid for it with my own money, and that made it perfect. I vividly remember the day everything changed. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when my younger sister, Rita, knocked on my door unexpectedly. She was 23 and still lived with our parents, which never seemed to bother her. She had always been content with their support while she was figuring out her life, as she put it. But that day, something was different. As soon as I let her in, I noticed how her gaze darted around my apartment with an intensity one had never seen before. Rita wandered from room to room, touching things, examining everything as if she were seeing it for the first time, even though she had visited countless times. "Your place is so nice, Julia," she said, running her hand along my kitchen table. "You're so lucky." I couldn't help but laugh. "Lucky, Rita? I worked hard for this place, you know that." She turned to face me, and I was surprised to see tears welling up in her eyes. "I can't take it anymore," she suddenly blurted out. "Living with Mom and Dad is suffocating me. They crush all my attempts at independence." I nearly choked on my coffee. It was funny hearing this from Rita, who had never shown the slightest interest in being independent. "Last I checked, you seemed perfectly happy with Mom doing your laundry and Dad paying your phone bill," I noted, trying to keep the skepticism out of my voice. "That's the problem," she said, pulling out her phone and quoting something from a Dr. Leone book about adult children and parental relationships. "It's classic codependency. If I don't cut the cord now, I'll be stuck forever. I'll wither away." I set my coffee on the table and looked at her closely. "Rita, what exactly are you asking me for?" She took a deep breath, and there it was, the real reason for her visit. "I need your help, Julia. I want to move out. But I need money for the first 3 months of rent. I'll get a job right away, and then I'll be fully self-sufficient, just like you." Maybe it was the way she said, "just like you." Or maybe I was just tired of worrying that she would never grow up. Whatever it was, I heard myself saying, "Okay, I'll help you." Her squeal could probably be heard 3 floors down. She hugged me so tightly I almost lost my balance. "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're the best sister ever, Julia. You won't regret this, I promise." A week after our conversation, Rita burst into my apartment, waving her phone in the air like she had just won the lottery. "Julia, I found the perfect place. You have to see it." I was in the middle of cooking dinner, but she practically dragged me to the couch and started scrolling through listings. My eyes nearly popped out of my head. The first apartment Rita showed me was in one of the most expensive complexes in the city. "Look at this view," she gushed, pointing to a photo of floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a breathtaking skyline at sunset. "And they have a rooftop pool, a gym, and even a concierge." I took a deep breath to calm myself. "Rita," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "this apartment is $2,800 a month." "But it includes parking," she countered, as if that solved everything. Before I could respond, she was already scrolling to the next listing. Okay, this one is cheaper, only $2,500. Look at the marble countertops in the kitchen." I couldn't hold back anymore and placed my hand over her phone. "Stop. These places are completely unrealistic. We're looking for something practical, Rita." I grabbed my laptop, which I had prepared for this exact conversation, and turned the screen toward her. "Look. Here's a much more reasonable option," I said, pointing to a photo of a 1-bedroom apartment in a good neighborhood. "It's furnished, has basic appliances, and the rent is affordable." Rita wrinkled her nose like I had suggested she move into a dingy basement. "But it's so basic," she mumbled, scrolling through the pictures. "It's clean, safe, and perfect for your first place," I said firmly. "In fact, it's better than my first apartment." Plus, it's within walking distance of several companies where you can find a job. She leaned back on the couch, arms crossed, her expression full of disappointment. I took a deep breath, trying to stay patient. Rita, this is exactly the kind of place you need while you're getting on your feet. Once you have a stable job and income of your own, you can move wherever you want. After what felt like an hour of persuading, she finally relented and agreed to check out the option I suggested. The next day, we met with a realtor, a cheerful woman named Linda. She gave us a tour of the apartment, which turned out to be exactly as advertised, modest but nice, with neat furniture and functioning appliances. Rita kept making faces, thinking I couldn't see her, but I chose to ignore it. When the tour was over, I said to Linda, "We'll take it," and pulled out my checkbook. I wrote checks for the security deposit and 3 months' rent in advance. While Rita signed the lease, I watched her, feeling a mix of pride and worry. This was really happening. Over the next few weeks, I called Rita regularly to check how her job search was going. Her answers grew increasingly evasive. The last time I called, my patience finally ran out. "Rita, I'm not going to keep paying your rent indefinitely. You need to find a job." "Don't worry about it," she said dismissively, and before I could reply, she hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling irritation rise within me. I had a sinking feeling that her idea of independence might be very different from mine. 3 months flew by faster than I expected. A major project at work consumed all my time. And then, when my phone lit up with Rita's name, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe she was calling with good news. Maybe she had finally found a job. But I was wrong. "Hey, Julia," she said in a casual tone, as if she were about to talk about the weather. "Just a reminder, rent is due on the 15th. I nearly dropped my coffee cup. "Rita," I began, struggling to stay calm, "we had an agreement. You were supposed to find a job and start paying your rent yourself. The whole point was for you to become independent, remember?" "Oh, come on," she interrupted, not even letting me finish. "I haven't found the right position yet, but I'm working on it. These things take time, you know." "No, I don't know," I snapped. "You've had 3 months to find something, anything. You wanted independence so badly, remember? Independent people pay their own bills." She hung up with such force I could practically feel it through the phone. I leaned back in my chair, trying to catch my breath. My heart was pounding, but I felt proud of myself. I had finally stood my ground. That feeling lasted all of 15 minutes. My phone rang again, and I glanced at the screen. This time, it was Mom. My stomach twisted painfully before I even picked up. "Julia Marie Thompson," her voice thundered through the line like a storm. "How could you? How could you refuse to help your sister?" I closed my eyes and exhaled deeply, bracing myself for the tirade. "She was crying, Julia. She told me everything." Mom went on relentlessly. "Mom, I already paid 3 months of her rent," I explained, trying to stay calm. "The whole point was for her to become independent." "Independent." "Stop," she cut me off, her voice sharp as a blade. "She's your sister. Family helps family, that's what we do. You have a good job, a good salary. You can afford to help her. But Mom, do you want her to end up homeless? Is that what you want, Julia? For your sister to be out on the street?" The guilt crept in slowly but surely, chipping away at my resolve. Mom's voice, honed by years of practice, carried the weight of a verdict. I knew exactly what was happening. I was being manipulated. But knowing it didn't make resisting any easier. "Fine," I finally relented, the words dragging out of me. "I'll pay for another 3 months. But that's it, Mom. This is the last time." "My girl," her voice softened instantly, almost tender. "I knew you'd do the right thing." When I hung up, my mood was ruined. I immediately transferred the money and sent Rita a message. "I've paid another 3 months of rent. This is the last time." Her response came seconds later, a single emoji, a smiling face with a halo. That simple message felt like a slap in the face. I realized immediately that I'd made a mistake. But what could I do? She was my sister. And Mom was right about one thing: I could afford it. A week later, I was lying in bed lazily scrolling through my phone when I stumbled across Rita's Instagram profile. I hadn't checked it in a while, but what I saw made my blood pressure spike. Her page was filled with photos taken in the apartment I was paying for. Rita posing on the couch, lounging with a cup of coffee in hand, or standing by the window bathed in soft morning light. Each shot looked like it belonged in a professional influencer's feed, styled to perfection. The captions made my blood boil even more: living my best life. Being true to yourself is the greatest gift. Sometimes you have to choose your own path. Trust the journey. I scrolled through her posts, gritting my teeth harder with each swipe. Over the course of a few weeks, she had posted dozens of photos. There was no mention of job hunting, no sign of any effort toward independence. Just endless selfies and pseudo-philosophical quotes. I couldn't take it anymore. I opened our chat and quickly typed a message: "When are you actually going to start looking for a job?" Her reply came so fast I wondered if she'd been waiting for my question. In the chat, a photo appeared, a formal letter on company letterhead. It was an invitation to a job interview, complete with the date, time, and address. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she really was taking her independence seriously after all. My phone rang, and Rita's name lit up on the screen. I answered, and she immediately squealed into the receiver, not even giving me a chance to say hello. "Did you see it? Julia, I got an internship interview. It's such a great company." But her tone shifted to one I knew all too well. "I need your help with something really important." "I need to look professional for the interview," Rita said. "First impressions are everything. I need a nice outfit. And a trip to the salon, to really make an impression." I raised an eyebrow. "Rita, maybe you could help me," she interrupted with an almost innocent smile in her voice. "I mean, like $800 should cover it all." $800? I nearly choked on air. "Absolutely not. Please, Julia, this could be my big break," she pleaded, her voice turning desperate. "I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I get the job. You want me to get it, don't you?" "Rita. Please, Julia, pretty please," she begged, her tone syrupy. "You know the receptionist is the first person they see. They always report back to the hiring manager. I read about it online. I need to look perfect." I rubbed my temples, feeling the anger start to simmer. "Please, please, please," she went on, her voice becoming almost whiny. I knew what she was doing. I'd seen her use the same tactics on Mom, on Dad, and now, on me. And yet, despite my inner resistance, I heard myself say, "Fine," through gritted teeth. "But this is the last time, Rita. Absolutely the last. You're the best sister in the world," she squealed, nearly knocking me over through the phone. "I love you so much." Hating myself, I opened my banking app and transferred the money, trying not to think about how I was once again giving in to her manipulation. Maybe this time, it would actually help her become independent. A few days later, during my lunch break, I decided to call her. "Hey," I started as soon as she picked up. "How did the interview go?" There was a long pause on the other end. "What interview?" she finally asked, as if she had no idea what I was talking about. My heart sank. "The interview you showed me the invitation for. The one you asked for $800 to prepare for." "Oh, that," she replied, laughing lightly. That laugh, cold and hollow, sent a chill down my spine. I checked out the company, and honestly, Julia, it's just not for me. The position was so boring, just data entry and filling out forms. Completely monotonous. I would have died of boredom doing that. Months of pent-up anger, suppressed for too long, suddenly erupted. "You're in no position to be picky," I shouted into the phone. You've never worked a day in your life. And I am not going to keep supporting you while you wait for your dream job to magically fall into your lap. Oh, sorry, Julia, I have to go. She cut me off mid-rant. I have a really important call. Talk later, okay? The line went dead before I could say another word. I sat at my desk, shaking with rage. This was the limit. My patience had run out. Suddenly, a thought struck me. I opened Instagram and went straight to her profile. There, just a few hours earlier, was a new photo. Rita was posing, not in a business outfit for her interview, but in a sparkling evening gown that likely cost every cent of the $800 I had sent her. The caption read, "Life is an evening gown." I tried calling her immediately, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I sent her a text, but she didn't reply. By the time I finished work, I was seething. Instead of heading home, I drove straight to her place. I could hear the music blasting from her apartment halfway down the street. As I climbed the stairs, the noise grew louder, and by the time I reached her floor, it was clear she was hosting a full-blown party. On a Wednesday night. I stood at her door, knocking so hard my knuckles turned white. The door finally opened after I was close to pounding it down. Rita stood there with a wine glass in hand, wearing the same sparkling dress from the photo. Her face was lit up with such carefree joy that I was momentarily struck speechless. Behind her, music blared, and the sounds of laughter and conversation spilled into the hallway. "Oh, Julia. You're here," she exclaimed as if I were an invited guest. "Come in, relax. Want some wine?" I froze in the doorway, feeling the anger inside me boil over. "Rita," I began, raising my voice over the music, "can we talk? Right now?" She rolled her eyes, took a sip from her glass, and waved me in, closing the door behind me. "Fine, fine. Just make it quick. I have guests." We stepped into a corner, and I grabbed her arm, lowering my voice so as not to draw attention. "What the hell are you doing? Is this what you spent the money I gave you on? Was this your professional interview?" Rita looked slightly annoyed, as if I had interrupted something more important. "Oh, relax, Julia. It's just a dress. A little fun never hurt anyone, okay? You're so uptight." "Fun?" I hissed, shaking with rage. "I gave you that money to turn your life around, not to throw a party and buy a dress that costs a fortune." Her expression turned cold. "You're always like this, Julia. Always so perfect. You think you can judge me because you've got everything together. But you know what? I'm not you. And I don't want to be you." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, trying to comprehend how my own sister could be so selfish and ungrateful. "This isn't about being me, Rita. It's about at least trying to take responsibility for your life." "Enough," she snapped, raising her voice. A few of her friends turned to look, clearly intrigued by our argument. "I don't want to hear it anymore. You always think you know best. But this is my life, Julia. Mine. Your life that's paid for with my money." I shot back, unable to hold it in any longer. Rita scowled, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "If it's so hard for you to help me, maybe you should just leave me alone." Those words hit harder than I expected. I looked at her, her cold expression, her expensive dress, the crowd of people surrounding her, and I realized something. I didn't even know who she was anymore. This girl, who prioritized parties over real life, who manipulated and used everyone around her, this wasn't the Rita I loved and tried to support. "Fine," I said quietly, feeling a growing sense of despair. "You're right. It's your life. And if you want to ruin it with your own hands, be my guest. But I'm done helping you." Her eyes widened, as if she hadn't expected me to say that. "You're serious?" "More than ever," I replied. "You wanted independence, Rita? Well, now you've got it." I turned and headed for the door, ignoring her calls after me. As I left, I noticed some of her guests staring at me in surprise, while others simply shrugged and went back to their conversations. Outside, I stopped and took a deep breath of the cool evening air. Anger still churned inside me, but underneath it was something deeper: sadness. I felt tears welling up in my eyes and quickly wiped them away before anyone could see. Rita had made her choice. Now she would have to live with it. I still had a spare key to Rita's apartment from the day I helped her move in. My hand trembled as I inserted it into the lock. The door opened silently, and the loud music hit me like a storm. It was so deafening that it felt like the walls were shaking. I stepped inside cautiously, though it felt unnecessary. The blaring music drowned out everything else. The scene before me was like something out of a bad college movie. At least 20 people crowded into the small apartment. Empty bottles and plastic cups littered the tables, and the floor was strewn with crumpled napkins and snack wrappers. People were laughing, dancing, and talking over the pounding music. At the center of it all, like a queen on her throne, was Rita. She was dancing wildly, waving her arms in the air, wearing that expensive dress I'd paid for. She moved as if the world belonged to her, showing not a hint of regret or responsibility. I was about to confront her right there in the middle of the room when, suddenly, the music stopped. The silence that followed was almost deafening. In that abrupt stillness, Rita's voice rang out, loud and clear, each word slicing through the room. "Guys, do you want to know the best part?" she began, grinning. "All of this, it's thanks to my sister." She raised her glass in a mock toast, and laughter rippled through the room. "My rich, successful sister Julia," she continued, making an exaggerated, dramatic gesture toward the crowd. "She's paying for all of this. Absolutely all of it." She nearly spilled her drink as she spun clumsily. My feet felt glued to the floor as I listened to her make a mockery of me. "She actually gave me $800 for interview clothes," Rita said, making air quotes with her fingers, barely containing her laughter. "Can you believe how dumb she is? I mean, look at me. I look way better in this dress than in some boring office suit, right?" The crowd erupted in laughter, some shouting, "You're so right," or "You're lucky to have her." Rita wasn't done. "She actually thinks I'm going to get a job. Why would I need to work when I have my very own cash cow of a sister?" She took another sip of her drink and smirked. "All I have to do is cry a little about wanting to be independent, and she throws money at me." The room burst into applause and cheers at her brilliance. But someone noticed me. A guest, who must have recognized me, paled and tugged on their friend's sleeve, pointing in my direction. A ripple of realization spread through the room as people began turning to look at me. The laughter faded, replaced by an awkward silence. All eyes were now on me. Rita, not immediately realizing what was happening, turned around. When her eyes met mine, the smile vanished from her face. It happened so quickly it was almost comical. Her cheeks turned pale, and the glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. I stepped closer, feeling every pair of eyes in the room watching me. My heels echoed against the wooden floor, the sound reverberating in the silence. I stopped in the very center of the room, right in front of Rita, on her makeshift dance floor. My hands were trembling, but my voice was steady. "So this is what you really think of me," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "This is how you treat someone who's trying to help you. You lie to me, manipulate me, steal from me, and then laugh about it with your friends." The silence in the room was deafening. I felt their stares on me, heard the whispers, and saw some guests quietly gathering their things, trying to slip out unnoticed. Rita stood frozen, staring at me. But then, as if flipping a switch, the shock on her face was replaced by something else. Her expression turned cold, almost calculating. I recognized that look. I had seen it before but had never fully understood it until now. "And what are you going to do about it?" she asked, her voice quiet but dripping with mockery. "You'll keep supporting me anyway. Do you know why?" She tilted her head, her smirk returning, but this time with a triumphant edge. "Because if you don't, I'll just tell Mom and Dad." And you know whose side they'll take. They always do. They'll make your life hell until you help your poor little sister again. I had left our parents' house with a stony expression, but inside, I was boiling. The parting cacophony of Dad's shouting, Mom's accusations, and Rita's sobs echoed in my ears. I walked to my car, trying to breathe steadily, though my hands trembled with anger. Two emotions warred within me, rage at Rita, who had only perfected her art of manipulation over the years, and a hollow ache from realizing that my own family would never take my side. Sitting in the car, I gripped the steering wheel tightly. I stared at the dark street ahead, my body refusing to relax. Their words, especially Mom's, still echoed in my head. We raised you better. It's your duty. You're too sensitive. It was as if my life was nothing more than a resource to be drained endlessly. As if my feelings didn't matter. Finally, a blazing realization ignited within me. I couldn't, shouldn't, and wouldn't live the way they expected me to anymore. The next day, I returned home, still reeling from the events of the previous night. I tried to distract myself with work, but the conversation with my family loomed over me like a shadow, buzzing in my mind like a persistent fly. By lunchtime, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. My phone sat next to my keyboard, its blank screen unsettling, as if it might light up at any moment with another demand or accusation. But nothing happened. Silence from my parents' house. Silence from Rita. And yet I knew it wouldn't last. A week later, a delivery arrived at my doorstep. The courier handed me a box, and I signed for it, puzzled. Opening it, I found a stack of letters, photographs, and trinkets I had once given Rita. There was even the bracelet I had given her for her 18th birthday, engraved with the words, "You can always count on me." At the bottom of the box was a note. "You chose not to be my sister. So I don't need anything from you." I stared at her scrawled handwriting, feeling my heart drop. It was so petty, so deliberately pointed. She knew this would hurt me. But more than anything, I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as though I had finally shed a weight I'd been carrying for far too long. The silence between me and Rita lasted for months. I went on with my life, working and savoring the small joys I'd once overlooked because of constant tension. I had evenings to myself now, time to read, pursue hobbies, and meet friends. I realized how much energy I had spent on her and how liberating it felt to have her out of my life. And yet, no matter how much I tried, the memories of my family still haunted me. Sometimes, I missed the days when we were closer, when Rita was my little sister, not a manipulator. When Mom hugged me without reproach, instead of pushing me toward a family duty. But every memory came with its shadow, the pain of being dismissed, of having my kindness exploited. These thoughts became a reminder, would never let it happen again. 6 months later, out of the blue, Rita resurfaced. She called me from a new number. I saw her name on the screen and stared at it for a few seconds, willing it to disappear. Finally, I took a deep breath and answered. "Hi, Julia." Her voice was cautious, almost timid, and I knew immediately she was up to something. "What do you want, Rita?" I asked, not willing to play her games. "Nothing," she replied quickly. "I just wanted to talk. About us. About family." I scoffed. "Family? After everything that's happened? Are you serious?" "Yes," she said, and there was a note of hurt in her voice. "I know I've made mistakes. But we're still family. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" That familiar feeling washed over me, guilt mixed with anger. She was playing on my emotions again, trying to find a weak spot. "Family means a lot, Rita," I finally said, keeping my voice steady. "But family isn't a one-way street. I can't be the only one giving. That's not fair. And that's not love." She fell silent. For a few seconds, all I could hear on the other end was her breathing. "Do you really think that?" "Yes," I replied firmly. "And if you ever decide that you truly want to change, to grow up, to stop using me, we can talk. But until you're ready, we have nothing to say to each other." "I understand," she whispered and hung up. In the months that followed, I often found myself thinking about her words. Did she really understand? Could she change? Or was it just another one of her attempts to lure me back into the same old trap? But to my surprise, she didn't call again. She didn't text or try to manipulate me. And though I didn't know what the future held, I felt certain I had done the right thing. I sat on the balcony of my apartment, wrapped in a soft blanket, with a cup of cooling tea in my hands. Outside, dusk was settling, the city lights flickered on one by one, and the muffled hum of the streets floated up to me. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind, full of tension, anger, and tears, but strangely also relief. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had control over my life, even if it had come at the cost of distancing myself from a family that couldn't let go of old patterns. My phone lay beside me, but I no longer waited for it to light up with Rita's or Mom's name. This was part of my new reality, silence. Not the oppressive, foreboding silence of before, but a quiet solitude in which I could finally exhale. A few more weeks passed before Rita unexpectedly called again. Her voice sounded excited, though this time it carried not anxiety but a hint of smug amusement. "Julia," she began, "are you sitting down?" "What's happened?" I asked, suppressing a sigh. With Rita, something was always happening. "Well," she drawled, "Rita's posted another masterpiece on Instagram. You might want to take a look." "Rita, you know I don't follow her page anymore," I replied, gazing at the sunset. "I know. But this one's worth your attention," she insisted. Reluctantly, I opened the app and typed in her name. On Rita's profile, there was a new post. In the photo, she stood in front of our parents' house, wearing a bright dress and her signature fake smile. The caption read, "Sometimes life throws challenges your way, but true family will always have your back when others turn away. Family is everything grateful." I felt heat rush to my face. Her words were clearly aimed at me, the one who had turned away. "I see you found the post," Rita said, noticing my silence. "Yes, I did," I replied, feeling anger rise again. But this time, it wasn't sharp, it was cold and calculating. A few days later, I received a letter from our aunt, who had always tried to stay out of the family drama. It was unexpectedly brief but clear. "Julia, I want you to know that some of us understand you. We see what you've been through. If you ever need support, know that I'm always here to talk." Those simple words touched me more than I expected. They reminded me that every family has its fractures and that not everyone sees the world the same way. I tucked the letter into my desk drawer, feeling a strange sense of relief at the thought that maybe I wasn't entirely alone in this chaos. Meanwhile, life went on. Work grew busier, and I threw myself into it wholeheartedly. I found new hobbies, finally signing up for the art classes I'd wanted to try for years. My circle changed, replacing endless complaints and demands with support, inspiration, and fresh goals. But sometimes, in the quiet evenings when the city was still, I found myself thinking about my family. About Rita, who, as far as I could tell, hadn't changed. About Mom and Dad, who continued to make sacrifices for their youngest daughter, putting everything else aside, including their own future. I pitied them, but I knew there was nothing I could do to help. A year later, one morning, I got a call. It was from an unfamiliar number, but I recognized the voice immediately. It was Mom. "Julia," her voice was quiet, almost weary. "I know you don't want to talk to me, but we need to meet." I exhaled, trying to steady the wave of emotions washing over me. "What's happened?" "It's Rita," she said, and I felt something tighten inside me. "She's in the hospital." She was. "It's a long story, Julia. But she wants to see you." My first instinct was to refuse. To shut the door on them again, as I'd done so many times before. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Sometimes, life demands more of us than we're ready to give. "Fine," I finally said. I'll come. When I entered the hospital room, the first thing I saw was Rita. She looked different. Her hair, always perfectly styled or brightly colored, was now tied back in a messy ponytail. Her face was bare, no makeup, and it looked tired, with deep shadows under her eyes. She glanced up, and there was something new in her gaze. "Hi, Julia," she said softly. I sat down beside her, unsure of what to say. The silence between us filled the room, but this time, it wasn't unpleasant. It felt hopeful. "Thank you for coming," she finally said. "I know I've made a lot of mistakes. But I want to change." I looked at her, feeling a mix of emotions rise within me. It was the first time in years that I saw sincerity in her eyes. And I knew that maybe, just maybe, this could be our first step towards something new. What do you think of this story? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.